First, I'm going to share just a little bit about who we are at Magnolia, provide some context just as to what strategic consulting is, and especially within the healthcare space. I can go a little bit deeper here. I mean, I can go as deep as we want, but I intend to kind of take a skim and then get to the resume section. But if questions or anything, don't hesitate to stop me. Then I think the real meat of this, from my perspective, is what are we looking for at the senior associate level, which tends to be where PhD students, especially if there's any professional experience to go along with it, would be applying it. The guardrails will hold the same if we're looking associate. I'll try to generalize where I can of like what is going to be the case anywhere in professional services. And then there's going to be a few areas that are more specific to us at Magnolia and the market research consulting side. Big theme is going to be the importance of strategic thinking and packaging your thinking within a framework. And then I do have some examples of resumes that I've received from PhD candidates that we can kind of look through together, and hopefully after we've done some explanation of my thought process, where I'm coming from, maybe we can review them together and see, what we think. Please ask me questions throughout, right? This is the hour is for you all. I hear myself talk all day. So my goal is really to share my experiences and perspective with you. So again, can go off script if you have questions, anything. I have the chat up, feel free to ping there. I can see most of you on the screen if you want to do the hand raise thing, but seriously, if you just want to interrupt me, it's no problem at all. Any thoughts, questions, if you're in the wrong place before I go any further? Cool. So let me do a little bit of intro and explanation of who we are at Magnolia Innovation. So we were founded in 2013 with the vision of being the go-to insights partner for medium, small-sized biotech companies. Our leadership team, which I have most of them posted here, we have diverse academic backgrounds. So that's kind of maybe one of the first ideas is there's no ideal background to get you ready to go into consulting. It's really about strategic thinking, your ability to kind of tell a story in a well thought out, easy to understand way, and think critically about business problems. Other thing I wanted to flag on this slide is 4 of our kind of 6 director or above pod leads, me among them. We all joined as associates or senior associates. It has been a great organization to kind of join and grow and develop my resume and professional experiences in. You can see some of the backgrounds here. My background, I have an MS in psychology. I did always think I was going to be a PhD. And then the prospect of doing what you all, had to do for 6 years, I was like, you know what? I like research. I don't care all that much about what I'm doing the research on. So I went and got into professional research. Stop here for a second. Just again, how we, think about ourselves and position ourselves in the market. Maybe again, just to give you guys some more context of who I am, what my perspective is going to be. So most of my engagements do focus on early development and launch readiness. So this is when folks are going to try to bring a pharmaceutical product to market. Maybe you're familiar with like phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 clinical trials. So maybe you're getting a positive phase 3 top line result and you're like, wow, this is going to go, get approved perhaps and go to market. What do we need to do to get all our ducks in a row from a, market understanding perspective to drive our marketing campaign and how we're going to talk to doctors and patients, all of this. So that's what we do at Magnolia for the most part, is help prepare launches for pharmaceutical products, particularly through the lens of leveraging market research. So we talk to patients, we talk to doctors, we do surveys, we do interviews to answer business questions and, put together the marketing strategy and kind of the brand persona. Within that, we do a lot of focus in oncology and rare disease. I myself do have a decent amount of mass market experience too. I've done a ton of migraine over the last few years, so we're helping small biotechs in the oncology and rare disease space bring pharmaceutical products to market to get all their ducks in a row from a strategy and marketing perspective. And then do have extensive global footprint if that's something that could be at all of interest. How healthcare works in different countries is different amongst the countries, if nothing else, but I find it kind of an interesting aspect of the whole thing. I'll do a quick pause here. Any questions? Do you guys have a sense of at least, what I'm doing in my day job? Is this giving you guys a bit of shape to it? I'll take the thumbs up.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Now I want to spend a minute kind of talking about the consulting mindset, right? I think I said this at the top, and I'll repeat it throughout. Like, a lot of what I want to focus on is having frameworks to your thinking, what strategic thinking looks like, how to, start trying to take your experiences and the stories that you're going to try to tell either on your resume or in interviews into something that some naive reader or listener can kind of quickly engage with and then have a conversation, right? That's a lot of what you're trying to do in a resume or an interview, is get to a point of conversation so you can engage and talk about what you've done. So within that, right, the consulting mindset, what we are doing is having hypothesis-led research. Right, we're not doing research for the sake of doing research. We are taking a question and then developing, okay, what's the best way to get at this question? We're generally leveraging semi-structured interview guides or fully structured survey vehicles to test these questions and get answers to them, right? But having good design and kind of basic research method acumen really valuable here, right? And crossing that with, okay, this is what we're trying to learn, this is the best, most pure design to learn that, but filtering this all into actionable advice, right? It's one thing to collect data in a methodologically sound way and say, hey, here's what we learned, right? And maybe the thought experiment or example that I always see in my head is like, you can, walk up to the cliff's edge of what your data supports pretty readily, right? If you have some experience, you know what you're doing. Okay, this is what the data has. I can speak to the data. But the step past that is what actionable advice is, right? Saying, here's what the data itself is telling me. Here's what I think this means. And taking that kind of step past the precipice, right? That's basically what this is all about. To do that, right, we do also need really clear communication. I don't know what to slow there. Clear communication. We're going to have varying audiences. I mean, this in itself is a really good example. I don't know the backgrounds of anyone on this line, right? So I'm trying to hopefully figure that out by some of the feedback I might get via questions or emotes on the Zoom chat, right? But yeah, tuning what I'm saying, what I'm trying to communicate to my audience is a lot of this as well. That's the only way I'm going to get any actionable advice or data I learned, findings I've made through, is if I can package it into a story or a set of slides to get the information across. And then to that last end there for the multi-level engagement, right? I may not just have one type of person on the other end of the line that I'm trying to talk to. I may have many different perspectives, and being able to kind of engage with all of those in a way that everyone can feel like they, essentially got their money's worth from a research project is what we're trying to do here. I'm going to pause again. Any thoughts at this stage? I'll maybe even park it here on what we're doing as a consultancy with kind of our main offerings. Again, I think I've mentioned we are market researchers, right? We leverage market research to provide the basis for our strategic consulting work, which does mean basically all of our projects have a research and strategy element to them. Occasionally we'll do pure strategy stuff. This would be like wargaming. If we know a new competitor is going to come out and we have a sense of maybe where their data is going to come in, we can war game and say, okay, let's divide up into teams. We'll be the competitor. We'll work under these set of assumptions. You'll be the competitor working under those sets of assumptions. We'll be ourselves and kind of play a game to see how folks may react and kind of plan so that we can develop our strategy accordingly. That would be an example of a pure strategy piece. See what else. Market access. I'll pause on this just to explain some jargon. Market access is the entire apparatus of bringing a drug to market from the payer reimbursement side, right? In America, we have privatized healthcare for the, a lot of it, right? Even Medicaid is done via private entities who execute Medicaid within the state. Some aspects of Medicare are privatized. So there's a lot to navigate. There's like 1,600 different Medicaid plans. There's many hundreds and thousands of different private commercial plans. So how do you get your drug approved at the individual payer level? I don't mean the FDA. That's a whole thing in and of itself. Analytics, right? So we do decent amount of what I would call advanced analytics. I don't know the backgrounds of everyone here, but like utility analyses like max diffs and turfs. Cluster modeling, we do a lot of two-step cluster modeling, or like k-means hierarchical clustering models. And training and panels. So training, touch on again, there's a lot of, so there are entire commercial functions that are developed or dedicated to training. And by that, I mean, if you're a pharmaceutical company, you have a drug that you're going to sell, you're going to train your field force of reps to have a story, a marching order of how you're going to talk to doctors about the product, all these things, right? That's a training function that you have at your pharma company, and we'll support there in either off the shelf training. So we have some modules on, how the journey of a script, right? From when a doctor puts pen to paper, how does it actually get into the patient's hand? And we can train field forces on this. It's interesting. Or train folks on the outputs of research projects we've done. Maybe we did a segmentation project. We understood, okay, broadly, you will run into 3 types of neurologists in the migraine space. Here's the 3 flavors. Here's how you change your sales approach as a function of where the doctor's at. And we're training a field force based on a research product that we put together. And then last panels, we do manage patients, physicians, other stakeholders within the healthcare space. They'll work with us directly. That's a whole function of keeping them happy, willing to engage in research at a drop of the hat, this sort of thing. Okay, so we have a fork in the road. From here, I can continue to talk a little bit about actual projects we do with names, and kind of share some of the most common types of projects that happen in market research consulting in the healthcare space. I can go into this if there's any interest, anyone has a question, or I can flip and we can start looking through some resumes and kind of how I approach things when I am looking at candidates to work at Magnolia with us. So I'll pause. Anyone wants to say, hey, talk to me about slides 8 and 9. Otherwise, I'll proceed. Okay, cool. We'll go to the hiring side of things. All right. So I hire at Magnolia. I engage with all aspects of the hiring process, from resume review to interviewing candidates. We have a case study component to final decision making. I also have developed our internal training for our team who does this, right? So this is a slide that I share a different version of, but the same idea when I'm training managers on how to review resumes. And when I'm training, managers or associate directors on how to execute interviews, what they're looking for in case studies. So I've been the person looking at resumes. I've also been the person training people who look at resumes. I've done a lot of resume support for, other universities as well. So I have looked at a lot of these. So from that lens, I'm going to share here at Magnolia, what am I looking for? Yeah, and we'll take it from there. Okay, so there's 4 items that are roughly in order of importance on this slide. The first is consulting experience, or what you can call consulting upside, right? So especially if we're talking about folks who are finishing their graduate degrees, you may not be able to say, hey, I consulted at Accenture for 2 years, things like this. But, I can identify in both your resume and when I have an interview with you if you have consulting upside. And by that, I mean strategic thinking, ability to tell a story, critical thinking and solving a problem, the giving structure to a nebulous problem, these sorts of things. I can say, I think with a pretty high degree of confidence, this is something that's going to be a priority across all professional services firms. This is the essence of what consulting is. I also think in my experience, this is the place where academia and professional research, professional consulting are very unaligned. And I'll speak to that in a moment. I'll speak to it right now. So, when we're being engaged with as consultants, someone is paying us a lot of money to answer a specific question and then provide that answer, right? We're expected to synthesize the data, generate actionable insights, present those insights in a cogent, easy to digest format. my experience, that's really at odds with how academia is approaching what it is to present findings from a project. And by that, I mean, often I see folks comprehensively presenting information, going through all the assumptions that they made, the reasons why they collected the data the way they did, any shortcomings in the method, and essentially presenting the collection, the data, their conclusions, but really, right, a lot of times the audience is as qualified, if not more qualified than the presenter to evaluate the information and kind of confirm that they agree. That flips on its head in consulting, right? I was engaged with because I know this space better. I have the time and bandwidth to dive really deep into this problem. And now I'm going to, pop my head back up and say, hey, here's what we learned. Here's what you should do about it. And then, yeah, I mean, I have everything stuffed, the closet rammed shut. But if you want to open, we can go look. But, if I do a good enough job, perhaps there's no need to go look back there. So specifically, how we evaluate the presence of this skill in both a resume review and then especially in an interview, we are looking for what you may have seen as called a STAR or an SCQA exercise. Perhaps some of you have seen this terminology before. Perhaps not. I will go into it. Don't worry. So this is nice to have if you can kind of present your information in this way on a resume. It doesn't go unnoticed. But again, it's going to be pretty required in the interview process. And even if you're not familiar with this framework, let me share it with you in a minute. And then maybe it'll become obvious why thinking and sharing information in this way is just really important to coming across as, I've said it a lot of times, the idea of being someone who can kind of tell a story to someone who doesn't really know what you were talking about a minute ago. So that's the big one, for sure. And that's, again, even if you're not interested in market research, not interested in healthcare, but interested in consulting, this is the stuff. Touch on market research experience. So this could be professional market research experience, or it can be research experience in an academic setting. There's pros and cons to each. There's something to be said for knowing how to do professional research. There's a lot of just jargon, intricacies in the market, right? That if you already know how to do that, saves me a lot of work. But again, 90% plus, this is probably 99% of our client engagements have some sort of market research. So familiarity with market research methods and jargon is helpful. Being able to frame your academic research experiences in market research terms that professionals can understand and appreciate, that's going to be a really nice to have skill, right? So if you're interested in market research, even if it's like, I just want to do market research and not the consulting stuff, then being able to translate what you've been doing in your academic work in words that someone on the other end of the line is going to understand would be really helpful. I'll get into it a little bit now. If this is something that I should zoom in on more, again, stop me and I can, but I'll give you the highest possible level, which would be qualitative and quantitative market research, or qual and quant. It's going to be hard to get anywhere in a market research conversation without those two terms coming up. And all they mean, right? Qualitative research, you could call it a semi-structured interview or a focus group, but right, it's generally a one-on-one setting, or otherwise a setting in which I can pivot the conversation based on the information I'm collecting currently. So to say it would be, oh, that's really interesting. Tell me more. If you can do that, you're probably in a qualitative research setting. If you can't do that, that means you're in a fully structured setting, right? So quantitative, like a fully structured one-on-one interview is very uncommon in market research. So yeah, you're either doing semi-structured or you're going to do a survey. Right? The big trade-off with a quant survey, yeah, I can essentially field many interviews in parallel and collect much more data in same units of time, probably for less money. But I can't pivot based on what I just learned. If I didn't build it into the survey ahead of time, I'm kind of stuck not asking an interesting potential follow-up question. On the market research side, the analytics side, right? Familiarity, experience with SPSS or R. I know I was trained on SPSS. I know R is increasingly more common. Either will serve you very well. And then familiarity with common advanced analytic techniques that are used in market research, to name a few: conjoint, MaxDiff, TURF, which these are all just forms of discrete choice modeling. If you're familiar with other forms of discrete choice, it should be pretty straightforward to translate those into these types of frameworks. And then cluster modeling, this is for market segmentation. So I specifically use the SPSS two-step which is just a fancy hierarchical k-means model. There's other ways to do this. And if you're familiar with like factor analysis, you're going to be close. Okay, third, healthcare experience or interest. So again, this is even more Magnolia specific, but again, 99, it's essentially 100% of our work's in the healthcare space. We work for pharmaceutical and biotech clients. So if you're interested in furthering the discussion with Magnolia, make sure you're interested in healthcare. In my opinion, healthcare is a really nice place to be in just because it never really gets stale. So you could view that as a good thing or a bad thing. I view it as a good thing. But right, you have to kind of relearn, or not relearn, just learn for the first time aspects of a disease area every time, right? Understanding why the disease works the way it does or affects people the way it does is pretty important if you're going to understand how a pharmaceutical product's mechanism of action kind of combats this and interacts with it. And if you're really going to, insightfully figure out, okay, why are doctors saying this or doing this or holding this perspective, and what are we saying and what's really going on here, knowing how the disease works and how the product works and how the doctors might be viewing this whole thing is pretty important to doing a good job. So I would say, one, if you have, a set of experiences to draw from, I've run into a lot of folks kind of coming out of research labs, and maybe they've done work in oncology or they've done work in like a specific healthcare space that can be really leverageable. And then again, that process of getting smart quickly in a new area, if you enjoy that, healthcare is a great place to be. You'll be doing it a lot. If you don't enjoy it, watch out, because there's a lot of that. But yeah, going through learning, I find that really enjoyable. So it's a good place to be for me. And then last, marketing experience or interest. Again, we're generally interfacing and consulting with either the marketing or the insights and analytics team at our clients. So having some understanding of the marketing side of healthcare can be useful. That is both, in the US specifically, direct to consumer, right? The US is one of the very few markets that allows direct to consumer marketing, but it is a big part of doing healthcare in the United States. And then physician marketing and promotion, having a sense or understanding of how that all works can be really helpful. Sometimes we'll have folks switch from marketing to the research side. This is kind of the fourth there. So again, from here, I'm going to go to those, the STAR and SCQA frameworks, and then we're going to look at some resumes. But if there are any questions on kind of these four aspects, or maybe I glazed over something and I thought I was clear, but it wasn't, pause. Any questions or thoughts on this page? Okay, I'll proceed then. All right, so I mentioned these two frameworks for explaining a situation or experience, the STAR and the SCQA. Let me quickly define those. So STAR is situation, task, action, result. And SCQA, same idea, situation, complication, question, answer. One of these came from one of the longtime partners at McKinsey back in like the 90s, and I forgot where the other one came from. I should have cited these. These are, problem scoping frameworks. And if you can start trying to tell your stories or communicate your experiences using these frameworks, it's going to, really help you out. And maybe I don't know how much interviewing you all have done, but maybe you've had someone in an interview do something like, hey, can you walk me through a challenging project that you worked on, or, an experience that didn't quite go the way you planned? And then kind of what did you do and what did you learn from that? Maybe someone fishes like this. This is what they're looking for. So I'll go through a couple of these now. And right, you all should be really good proxies for this goal, right? My goal with these is, hey, you guys have no idea what I'm about to say. You don't really have any background in either of these projects, I don't believe. So just make a lick of sense, right? That's really where putting, rubber hits the road. So let me start here on the left. So the situation we have is a biotech, so pharmaceutical company, needs to quickly test a consumer ad before they begin production shooting, right? They're about to spend a ton of money filming an ad. They want to double check that it's good before they go and incur all that cost, right? So what's the task? Magnolia is going to set up a series of quick turnaround online focus groups. So quick turnaround, we just have to do it really quickly. We have like 2 weeks to do this. Online focus groups with 300 patients to pressure test the animatics and uncover any watchouts. So the animatics, this is, imagine like a 30-second ad, but instead of, an ad, it's like 12 still images and there's like text underneath each image of like, breaking it down into like its main component parts. I'm going to uncover any watchouts, right? So this is the ad we're going to shoot. Anything we should be aware of or potentially tweak before we go and proceed. So the action, what did we learn? So overall, ad really compelling, works well, good, because it's kind of late to wholly redo it. But there's a specific scene where the patient is suffering from an attack. This was migraine, by the way. I don't know if anyone's ever gotten a migraine attack. If you have, imagine this. If you haven't, just imagine having like shooting pain. I don't know, migraine. So right, someone's suffering from a migraine attack. They take the medication and then immediately, right, it like dissolve cuts. And now they're in a spin class riding on the bike. The patients found this highly unrelatable and it strained the believability of the ad, right? I don't care if this is, a lobotomy. I'm not getting on a bike right after having a migraine. It just does not happen. So, based on this feedback, it became clear, hey, is there any way we can replace this with a less strenuous activity? That's what it was, right? And we could follow up because these were focus groups. We could say, hey, like, okay, hang on. So y'all hate the spin class. If it was yoga, would that be better? And everyone's like, oh yeah, way better. So right, as simple as it was, is the spin class was replaced with a yoga activity, right? The folks filming it are like, oh my God, we have the bikes, we're here on set. We're like, all right, well, let's get 20 yoga mats and lay them out on the floor. It's the same thing. And that's what they ran with. You can find the ad. It's real, I swear. And yeah, it succeeded. We had, the brand persona of being kind of more optimistic, positive than our competitor. If at the moment you held our ad with the competitor ad, theirs is all black and white and like terrible, and ours wanted to be more uplifting, but not unbelievable. And then, yeah, ultimately the ad tests well against the brand's KPIs. Those are key performance indicators, right? What are we supposed to be good at? And are we good at those things? So I'll pause. That was the idea. Does that make sense? Anyone unable to follow my story there? Okay, and I see a number of folks have joined as we've gone on. So hi, I'm Andrew Stokesbury. We're talking about what I'm looking for as a hiring manager in the consulting space, and I'm going through right now some strategic frameworks for kind of explaining an experience you've had. I'll go on the right. I'll get a little, more in the weeds, right? This is a pretty high level, like why ad not good, how make ad better. So now we'll do this SCQA framework, right? So, okay, so here's my situation is our client's product has launched and it's captured 51% of the market 6 months after launch. And just for sake of simplicity, let's assume it's a 2 product space, right? So I have 51%, competitors got 49%. Okay, great. 6 months after launch, it's very good. Complication, the competitor has increased their sales force by 50%, right? So they were 100 people, now they're 150 people to now be double us. So we were only 75 people. So they had a small lead in sales force, people talking to doctors, trying to get them to buy write the product. Now they're twice as many reps as us, right? Twice as many full-time employees, hours that are allocated to talking to doctors. And they've increased their consumer ad spend by 35% to now be 2.5 times our spend, right? So they have twice as big a sales force and they're spending 2.5 times as much messaging to consumers, that direct to consumer ads that I talked about a minute ago, right? So the question is, how do we maintain our market position given the realities of our potential spend in 2021? This deck is showing its age. But right, so, we can't just be this big organization, right? Clearly, we're going up against a bigger competitor who has deeper pockets than us. How do we keep this 51% lead given these realities? Answer, we double down on our top 10,000 doctors, right? So we're going to go deep when they go wide. We're going to try to capture 70% of that market, 70% of the top 10,000 doctors. We're going to continue to run our 30-second consumer ad rather than the competitor's 45-second ad, right? So we're just kind of being more efficient per ad exposure, even though our ads are shorter, so we can say less. But, we can kind of compete in that way in terms of just kind of share of voice. So it's a metric folks will look at. And we're going to continue investing in social media and other promotional channels with really favorable returns on investment, rather than trying to go head to head on the TV ad spend, right? Maybe we can leverage social media influencers who have a really wide reach, right? They send a tweet and 1 million people read it, or an Instagram post, but it's a lot cheaper to pay for a super high-end influencer. I've seen the numbers. It's way cheaper to pay super high-end influencer than it is to run a TV ad by a mile, right? So that's, again, we have a small lead. They're coming at us, though. They're about to spend, they just wrote a blank check to try to take us out. So what are we going to do? We're going to go deep. We're going to stay efficient on the TV ads, and we're going to really keep going heavy on social media and the other channels where we think we're just smarter than the competition. Okay, makes sense? So when these frameworks are properly applied, and hopefully I was a good example of that, the reader, you all, should see, okay, what trade-offs were made. Obvious one, the ad can't both be a spin class and a yoga class. The field force can't also go wide and deep with the same same amount of dollars or same amount of FTEs. You'll see that full-time employee or full-time equivalents. Right, can't go wide and deep. And I'll pause here just to make a point. This idea of trade-off, that's strategy. If someone ever asks you in like an area like, what's strategy? They might. I do that sometimes. The answer is trade-offs, right? If I can do everything all the times, there's no strategy. I just do it all and I win. It's great. But in most situations, you can either do one thing or do something else. How do you figure that out? That's the essence of strategies. How do you make trade-offs? How do you place bets in an intelligent way? I don't think that's a controversial answer. Okay, second, the context around the decision, right? So why did we fire alarm and tell everyone to switch out the ellipticals for the yoga mats? Or why are we doubling down on our 10,000 and doing what we're doing down here, right? What's the context for this? And then really the key here, especially from like an interviewing perspective, guys, right, is did I easily prompt the next layer of clarifying questions? So here, one, maybe, I don't know if anyone had the same question, but why do I think capturing 70% of the top 10,000 will allow us to maintain a 51% share? This is like a massive assumption I just like threw out there. But right, that's a lot of what this is I'm trying to, hey, this is something I did that I'm trying to tell you about in a way that you can go, oh, that's interesting, but how, what did you do for, or how about, or why didn't you, right? And now I'm having a conversation, and it's it's good. We would want job interviews to go much differently than this call, where people are talking to me instead of me just talking at a wall. I'm joking. Okay, I'm going to stop here. I have a few actual resumes that I've gotten that we can go through, but here and with the, the prior slide, any questions at all, anything that I glazed over, maybe anything you disagree with, right? This is my opinion of things, but I'll give it a minute if anyone has any thoughts.
Hi, I'm Kiara. So I have a question. So I understand like what you just presented in terms of the STAR and the SCQA, but I was wondering how would that translate exactly to an interview? Because would you have something like this in front of you, or is this like more of a verbal thing you would try to do when you're explaining something?
Yeah. So if you're saying as someone who's being interviewed?
Yes.
Yeah, I would recommend you go through a few of these and write them down beforehand, right? And you have the advantage of you wrote your own resume, right? So you can kind of figure out, if you're really trying to link all this up and have cohesion, it's another good thing you should have. I can put stuff on the resume that sounds interesting and attention grabbing and prompts a question that I have a pre-baked STAR SCQA to go into, right? That would be a really effective strategy. And then if I've done that, if I've laid a couple hooks, then why not write them all out and practice delivering them? Yeah, that's what I would do. Does that make sense?
I think so. So you're saying you would put this like the situation, task, etc., in your actual resume, like written?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I misunderstood you, Kiara.
That's okay.
No, I wouldn't write it exactly like this in the resume, although a really distilled version of this might be a good idea, and we might see some of that in a minute. But in terms of interview prep, I would recommend having, especially if it's a virtual interview, right? And if not, you can write it down in practice beforehand. But I would write it all out and just practice delivering the story ahead of time. And it's right. It's really easy to practice on people who's like, hey, you have no idea what I'm about to tell you. Does it make any sense? And try that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Anything else? Thanks for the question. Oh, I see the chat. Hey, Jared, I see your question. I'm going to go back to 11. What struck me was 4. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to play it back to you. Let me make sure I got it right. It's basically I have perhaps run afoul of, hey, entry level job, have 3 years of experience and all these things. That's essentially what you're asking me about? Yeah. Okay. Cool. So the trick would be to link up what you already have to what I'm looking for and doing that legwork ahead of time. And what exactly that's going to look like, that's where it's going to start varying by wherever you're applying, right? If you're doing professional services, I'm confident number one's always going to be there. But if you're going to apply to, Bain or Boston Consulting, right, 2, 3, and 4 may be very different. But the premise of, okay, here's what you're looking for, here's what I've done, and I'm going to sync it all up for you and tell you why it matters, why it's related. Like that's what I'm encouraging you to do. Because right, if you leave it on the interviewer to do it, you're running a lot of risk, right? Because like you're the best disposed to know, okay, this is what I've done. I've thoughtfully looked into what you're looking for and how do I package it all up, right? I'm not per se saying you need consulting experience, but I am saying if you're able to tell me a story about what you've been doing at school or in a, a thesis or your dissertation, right? Why? Tell me about your dissertation, right? Can you bring me in where I haven't been in the data for 3 years with you? I don't have any idea what you're about to tell me. Can you give me an elevator pitch in like 2-3 minutes so that I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. And now I can appreciate all the hard work you've done, everything you've thought through. But right, I didn't need to be already an expert in the space to engage with it. That's what this looks like if you don't have the credential of, well, someone else who does consulting hired me for 2 years, right? Short of that, show me that you can think about it this way. And then same thing with the market research and other experiences, right? Is show me, link it up for me of here's what I've been doing. And actually it's really close to what you guys do. Here it is, right? Does that make sense? Cool. Yeah, it's broadly the idea is, be me as either a resume reviewer or an interviewer, right? Like I have a full job, right? I run a consulting team. That is, in fact, what my job is. And maybe, well, not so much nowadays, but what I used to do is I'd get on the train at 6:30 to go home, and I'd have 12 to 15 resumes that I was responsible for reviewing that evening, and I'd review them on the train ride home. It's like a 45-minute train ride, right? So I'm looking, tired, I just worked a full day. I'm looking quickly, and I'm looking for something that jumps off at me is like, oh, great, right? And that could be for good or for bad, right? Sometimes if it's like, hey, I want to do marketing because I want to be super creative and make ads for stuff, I'm like, oh, great. That's not what we do at all. Love it. Or if someone's like obviously a good candidate, great, right? The ones I don't like are where I'm like, oh, is there something here? There might be. It says PhD. So, I mean, I know those, they don't get those for free. So what am I missing? Like, why did this person apply here? What should I be seeing, right? If you're making me work already there at the interview stage, not ideal. And then same thing in the did I say interview stage? Resume stage. And then same thing in the interview stage, right? If you are going to make me pull teeth to figure out why your experience is irrelevant for what we do, right? You're just setting yourself up less optimally than you could have by coming prepared to lead the conversation, right? Same thing with an interview, right? Is like maybe that's the 30 minutes I'm not in back-to-back meetings all day, and that's where HR booked the 30 minutes to speak with you, right? And I want to have a great conversation, but I want you to have come prepared and have questions for me and be ready. Like you'd be shocked at how many times I ask something that's written on a resume and someone's like perplexed and wasn't ready for the question. Like you picked what goes on the resume, right? I'll move on though. Any other questions on this slide or the framework slide before we start looking at some resumes? All right, moving on. Okay, so we have two here, the left and the right. These are, swear these are real PhD candidates speaking about their first professional experience. So I tried to be as apples to apples too, is these are PhDs who have one experience, professional experience. Again, I know that may not be everyone here, but it made it easier to do apples to apples, right? Nobody's dissertation's the same. I'm not going to read these out to you because I did that in my prep meeting with Katie, and I think I poisoned the well really hard. So I'm just going to ask everyone who wants to participate to spend a minute reading each of these. And again, to be clear, this is like literally copied and paste from the Word document or PDF that they uploaded. I didn't do anything here. But I'll ask, and feel free to type it in the chat as you go, or I don't know, I'll give a moment to pause. But yeah, which of these do we think does a better job conveying information kind of within those strategic frameworks that I'd just been mulling over for the last 15 minutes? I agree. It's candidate 2. I'll give my thoughts, and then please, anything that jumped out that I didn't pick up on, let's feel free. But mainly it's framing this in terms of what you've done, right? And the bolding doesn't hurt. I go back to this well constantly. I encourage everyone to bolding information, like bolded phrase, colon. Oof, it never gets old. But right, I'm teed up so well here. How did you assess the scientific merit of potential drug candidates, right? So this person's talking about, like I said at the beginning, like phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 clinical trials. So someone somewhere is eyeing up everything in phase 3, which is thousands and thousands of drugs, and a fraction of drugs in phase 3 get approved, and it's like a total lottery before phase 3 even. So this person's in like M&A or something, mergers and acquisitions or something, and they're trying to figure out which drugs currently in trial have a good chance of getting approved, right? It's super interesting. And this is a much more natural way to start a conversation, because I can say, how do you do that? Like, I mean, someone's got to be out there figuring out, oh, it's a loser. Oh, maybe, oh, that's going to be a game changer. But yeah, what's your process? Super interesting. Much more interesting than what we have here, right? Collected data. And you can see, like, this person's very clearly articulated all the stuff they've been up to, right? Like developed surveys using Qualtrics, collected data using mTurk and SPSS and Stata. Like, those are all the programs I mentioned a second ago, like collected, coded, analyzed qualitative data. This is probably the easiest one for me because, right, coded and analyzed qualitative data. So this is adding some sort of like defined structure to an interview. That's pretty interesting. Collaborated to design and execute research and innovation. I don't know, did this person tune the resume for me? Maybe. Innovation. I always think that when I see it. Lectured a class and instructed in entrepreneurship, and then, presented to a ton of people. But yeah, you hold it side by side, provided expert analysis of drug asset accounting, prepared reports and presentations. And again, you can even like look at, where's the like even this, right? Like presented research at major thing, prepared reports and presented assessments, but always audience adapted, scientifically rigorous and unbiased, of large amounts of complex and public health records, right? There's just so many hooks here for someone to ask you a question. Like, how do you make something unbiased? Why? That's a bold claim. Like, how do you do that? You don't lay a hook and then have no answer, right? If I ask you how do you make stuff unbiased, and you're surprised with that question, like, well, don't put it on the resume then. But since it's here, I presume you have an answer. And developed, executed outreach and recruitment strategy as a platform for scientific engagements, right? What's clear is they've given enough depth that I can, see what they've been up to and ask questions. And Kiara, back to your question, right? Like, maybe you see even this one, I think is close, right? Of like, okay, situation, task, action, result. Like, yeah, I don't have the result here, and the action is implied, but the situation is someone's trying to figure out if drug is going to be a winner or a loser. The action is there's some assessment. The result is it's either going to be good or it's going to be bad. And then, maybe someone buys it or not. But right, I've got the shell here that I can ask. Okay, well, like, how do you do this? And that's where, right, that's where your resume has to get you, right? Is like, oh, this is relevant for what we do. So they didn't like apply to the wrong job by mistake. I won't feel silly asking someone to take 30 minutes out of their day to talk to this person. That's what your resume does, right? And then your resume serves you one more job in the interview of probably the interviewers looking at the resume. Perhaps they pulled the resume up 2 minutes before the interview. I've done that many times. And I'm going to say, "Oh, tell me about that." And now it's on you, right? Now that's you to carry the ball home from there. I'll pause. Sorry. Any questions on anything I was going over? Anything that, jumped out at anyone who voted for number 2, either in the chat or you thought it, that I didn't touch on?
Yeah, hi, I'm Alessandra. I have a question. Did both of these candidates end up getting an interview or just one or the other?
I'm sure I passed the right one through for interview. The left one, it would have to get saved by something else, or they would have had to have applied as like an associate, not a senior associate. Like if they're, I have myopically only taken a portion of the resume. If there's something else above or below that showed some strategic thinking or something like this, I'd be more into it, right? But this is, okay, you're in the strategy and innovation department, and then you just kind of listed off things you did with no structure to it. Like I'm very lukewarm. Again, if someone's coming out of undergrad or something and it's like, "Hey, I've done a ton of research. I know how to do research, but I don't really know how to think yet." Maybe game. But here this is, I haven't seen any, I haven't seen anything that tips me over into a yes yet. Fair enough?
Right. Yeah. So just taken alone in isolation, it was didn't quite get the pass.
No, it's not enough. Because again, I go back to here, right? Which is either experience doing this kind of strategic thinking and problem solving, or something to let me know, oh, this is someone who will be able to do that. And I'm, there's none of it here, right? And then like this, like you're in the strategy department and you're this, yeah. But yeah, I guess, and let me zoom out to try to, again, some resume advice. Like, it's not necessarily important to comprehensively cover everything, right? Like I've done, I don't know, like 600 projects in like the last 10 years. Like obviously it's not important for me to enumerate all of those to anyone if I were applying for a job. It's most important to be interesting and relevant and show that you spent a little bit of time tuning this for the company you're applying for, and have a few key things that someone can dive into and latch onto. I see that a lot of people trying to just get everything, especially when I'm like coaching folks who are like out of school and stuff like this. Like, it's not important. 3 or 4 things that you expand on a little bit, probably way more mileage than like 12 things that you're just like, "Oh, but I also did that." We'll do one more where I don't accidentally have the answer at the bottom of the slide. So it's gonna get a little harder. So again, these are 2 same types of role, right? So PhD candidate, well, they are PhDs, job candidates with one prior role, and again, straight up copy and pasted. So we'll do the same thing. I'll pause for a minute or until there's a bit of traction on the chat. Yeah, which one do you guys like more, left or right, or 1 or 2? Okay. Turn it on its head this time through. So Alessandra, quick with the candidate 1. How come?
Honestly, it took about 10 seconds for me to make a choice, really. If I had to quantify it in time, it was just so much easier to read. It was really clear that they had an action, but then they quantified their deliverables. Whereas for example, researched, analyzed, and produced competitive landscape for 3 drug candidates. It's just very easy to read. Versus the one on the right, it just looked, in contrast to the one on the left, like kind of complicated.
Yeah. I want to latch onto the complicated, right? I think that ladders up really well with the point I was just making of like less can often be more if it's thoughtful. I also want to, I heard you say it, like the action word. I want to maybe suggest some caution with that idea. Insofar as, right, if I like go back here, we have a lot of action words, right? Like developed, collected, collaborated. Like I bet this person was told that they should have action words. This one too, like participate as action, right? You know, okay, maybe not that one. Yeah, okay, maybe candidate 2 here does a worse job, but we'll pick on this one for a second, right? Like there's action words here, still not better. This one also has action words, right? But that's maybe not your litmus test of is this good or not, is if it's an action based. It's probably a concern if it's not, but there's more to it. But otherwise, yeah, no, I agree with you, right? Like each one of these is serving the purpose of, is it obvious to me why this person applied here? Yeah, absolutely, right? We bring drugs to market and we help, you know, with the marketing and brand strategy elements of it. Like totally. Okay. And, you know, have they given me things that I can ask questions about? Like, oh my God, built a novel method to accelerate pipeline forecast modeling. So what they're saying here is, okay, so novel method, right? So I built something that is new to pipeline forecast modeling. So this is like, how much money can a drug make that comes into this market, right? That's like a really important initial step very early on to figure out how, you know, what's the maximum upside 15 years from now if we bring this thing to market, and how does that impact how much money I'm willing to risk now, right? So this is incredibly important. And my goodness, does this sound interesting, right? Like, you better have a good answer, because this is like a giant flashing neon sign of like, ask me how I did this. But presuming that it is good and in fact novel, like that's you've you know, resume did a lot of work for you. And then yeah, so to your point, like I can pick on any one of these and it's interesting. Like assess drug first to market feasibility. Yeah, that's interesting. It's like that war game that I was talking about a little bit ago. So on and so forth. Yeah, so totally. And then we look at the right, and again, you know, participate in a wide variety of applied health services and policy-related research projects in collaboration with other healthcare organizations, pharmaceutical partners, and academic institutions. Like, it's not bad. And right, if I spend some time to chew on it, like, okay, so applied health, policy-related research projects, okay. You know, okay, so this is how the rubber's hitting the road, how people are accessing healthcare, I think. And you're doing it in a multifactorial, or not cross-collaborative way, right? Healthcare organizations, I can guess what that is, pharma partners, and then academic institute. You're like, okay, you know, and then we collect data in person, and then look, they're listing out some of their analytic vehicles, right? Cultural consensus, template analysis, descriptive statistics. I'd argue these are not the most interesting, but they at least listed them out. Research products include conference presentations, peer-reviewed publications, research reports, journey map. Like this person's done a ton, right? But there's just like nowhere to start with a conversation, right? I'm going to ask like, oh, tell me about the descriptive statistics, or like, how does remote and in-person data collection differ or whatever? It's, you know, the idea of pulling teeth or me having to do a lot of work. And I'm already worried that this person didn't really tune what they're talking about for what I do, right? I don't know. Maybe this person didn't touch it at all, and it's just a perfect tee up for what I do at Magnolia. Or, you know, maybe someone spent 10, 15 minutes looking at the website and kind of linking them all up. Okay, so I'm sliding into home here with 2 minutes. This was the content I wanted to cover. So thanks everyone who stuck around, and I sincerely hope this was a good use of your time on a Monday evening. But I can go a few more minutes, so I don't want to cut anyone off. If there's any questions, or, you know, you signed up for this call and you thought I was going to talk about one thing and I didn't talk about it at all, feel free. Any open questions? Lynn, I see your hand up. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question regarding the second example. So obviously the first one provides a better strategic way of explaining what he or she has done than the second person. But I noticed the role of the two people are different. The first one is a contractor. Sounds to me like this person is the leader of the team, not involve the whole thing. Where the second one is a research associate. Maybe it's not a leader, but it just participate part of the project. Maybe that's in addition to the person failed to describe in a strategic way, but like the person didn't participate the whole process. That's why.
Yeah. So a few thoughts there. I guess first, contractor can mean anything. Contractor could mean like a receptionist is often a contracted employee. Like this could be anything. This, like you're saying, it could be someone really senior and is the pivot point of the whole project, or it's, essentially a hired set of hands. So I don't put a ton in just seeing this word. I do see, the new product strategies, and maybe where this fits is this like after a couple internships or something, but I wouldn't fixate on the contractor term. And to your point of research associate too, yeah, again, who knows what that means? I can presume it means they're not the most junior person on the project, but yeah, perhaps they're not the most senior. To your point though, I think it's important if, one, yes, you do need to be able to speak to what did you actually do on the project. Don't overstate, don't take credit for work that someone else did that you were just present for. But that's different than having an understanding of why are we doing what we're doing. And I'm sure, right, we don't do research to have peer-reviewed publications. That's something that happens, right? But that's not, I didn't do the research to get a publication. I mean, maybe if you're like in some very pragmatic, situation where like, well, I need one more paper to get tenure. Okay, fine. But in general, right, I'm doing the research to test a hypothesis, to learn something, to further the field, right? I have like my circle and I'm popping it out one little iota. And that's focusing on that's going to serve you a lot better than trying to like comprehensively just list all of the outputs you did. I think that's really the difference here is this person went deep on a few key things and they just picked their shots really well. Whereas this person, again, ran kind of just the comprehensive gamut, right? They maybe would have been better served picking one conference presentation that they're super passionate about and know inside and out and can make sound interesting and focus on that.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Anybody else? And again, please, you can feel free to zoom out anything at all I can speak to in the last couple minutes we have. And hey, if not, again, thanks so much, everybody. I hope this was helpful. I think my email should be retrievable from Lynn or Katie if anyone wants to follow up with anything. If this looked kind of interesting and you want to learn a little more, happy to chat. I've been in the same situation before, and my perspective is a lot of people paid it forward for me when I was just starting out and didn't know what good looked like or didn't know what I should be looking for or how to tell a story, what have you. So yeah, don't hesitate to reach out if a further conversation would be useful. But otherwise, have a good Monday. Can you give tips for those coming directly? Say more, Kiara. What do you mean? But yes. Tips for interviews. Yeah. Okay. So a few general tips on interviews, right? So first, do your homework ahead of time, right? As much familiarity as how, the organization you're applying into. And if it's a really big organization, is specific, right? If you're applying to, McKinsey, you're not applying to McKinsey, you're applying to a team within McKinsey. So look into that. And if you've already secured the interview, so good job, congrats. Be familiar with how they work and start finding how can I link what I've done to what you guys do, right? That's going to be big thing number one. Big thing number two, have some number of questions, right? When I structure an initial interview, I always book 45 minutes. I do that for my own safety. And I intend to execute a 45-minute interview where I'm going to ask you questions for 25 minutes, give or take 5. And I'm going to expect you to ask me questions for 15, 20 minutes. That is an intentional part of the interview where some people don't have questions prepared, and that is very negative for them. Some people have very boilerplate questions prepared of like, what's your favorite thing about the job? Or, wow, you've worked there for a long time. Like, how come, or, what don't you like? Which again, those are fine. And if those are nested among some specific and thoughtful questions, all good. But yeah, I would say highest level tips without any, more context or seeing your experiences, Kiara, would be how can you do your homework to link up what you've done to what the place you're applying to does, and can you come prepared to ask the interviewer thoughtful questions that show you did the homework. Your interviewer is sometimes named beforehand, right? You may get that right. It's a Zoom invite or something, right? If you know the person's name, look them up, right? Sometimes people have looked me up on either the company website or LinkedIn or both beforehand, and they, can throw something out to kind of be thoughtful, but also make it clear, like, hey, I did my homework. I'm serious about this. And that doesn't go unnoticed. Be really familiar with your resume. That's a really bad mistake. If you're caught flat by something on your resume, just again, imagine how that looks for the other person. Like, you wrote your resume. You can't not know what's on there. It's not good. That's what I got.